Introducing Punchbowl News. From Anna Palmer, Jake Sherman, and John Bresnahan. News about the people who matter, for the people who matter. Join the community at punchbowl.news.
Well, good Wednesday afternoon. I'm Anna Palmer, CEO and founder of Punchbowl News. Thank you so much for joining us for this virtual pop-up conversation with Senator Stabenow, focused on the climate and clean energy investments that have been proposed as part of reconciliation and the future of those proposals. A big thank you to Ceres for partnering with us on this event and making it possible. After our conversation with the Senator, CEO and President Barbara Humpton of Siemens will join me for a fireside chat. All right, and just a quick reminder that you can share more about this panel and find us on all social media channels at Punchbowl News. And with that, let's get started. Senator Stabenow, welcome to the virtual stage.
Anna, it's great to be with you.
Well, you are a member of the Senate Democratic leadership. You serve as chair of the Policy and Communications Committee. You also are the second senator from Michigan to chair the Agriculture Committee. You're in your second stint there with this gavel, so you certainly have a lot of experience to bring to this conversation. Before we get to the climate kind of conversation, which was going to really be grounded in this whole event, I do want to ask you a few news of the day questions, in particular around Ukraine. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is dominating global headlines, and concerns over inflation and food prices are growing, especially considering that Ukraine is such a huge supplier of wheat. You chair the Ag Committee. What can be done to combat this? How concerned are you about the cost of food?
Well, first let me say, Anna, that we heard from President Zelensky again today. I was on a Zoom a week ago. But we had all the members of Congress there. And once again, just incredible courage, inspiration. He's doing everything humanly possible to help his country, to help his people fight for their freedom. And we need to be doing the same thing. And we are really all in to do that. But Putin's brutality, this war, frankly, coupled with what has happened from COVID and the supply chain breakdowns, has caused really a 1-2 punch here in terms of challenges for us as it relates to prices going up because of the mismatch in terms of supply chains and so on. And so on the one hand, we've got to make sure we're doing everything we can to support the Ukrainians to stop this war of Putin's as quickly as possible. And then we are leaning in on issues related to supply chain so that we can create more possibility for local foods, local processing, regional processing. In the American Rescue Plan, I was able to get dollars and that Secretary of Agriculture is now using to help, for instance, create small and medium-sized meat processing operations, for instance. We have 4 big multinational companies right now, and they are squeezing the farmer, but also raising prices on consumers. And so there are transportation costs we have to address. There are a range of costs that have come about, frankly, because of what's happened related to COVID. And we are addressing all of those, the infrastructure bill, supply chain issues, on all these things. It's all about bringing down costs.
I want to ask you one quick question there and follow up on Ukraine, and then we'll switch over to climate. But on weapon sales, is that something that you support? Do you think that's going to happen?
Well, we're already doing that. I mean, thousands and thousands of Stinger missiles and surface-to-air missiles, and we're finding out more and more as our military leaders are working with Ukraine and working with our NATO allies, even more and more that can be done with drones, for instance. They're very effective, high technology drones called switchblades that are something that can be used, can be actually put in vans or on the ground in Ukraine, but have very long distance. And so there's a whole range of things. We're already doing it. The president announced more today. We had about a $14 billion package, half of that being military, half humanitarian aid we passed last week. And we're going to continue to do everything humanly possible because this really is about air defense and being as smart and clear about the most effective tools for the Ukrainians to have. And I support doing that 100%.
Great. Let's talk climate. I have a lot I want to get to this afternoon, but I want to kind of tee up from that 30,000 foot level. There was a lot of climate provisions that were part of Build Back Better. Folks were very excited about it. That has clearly stalled. But can you talk about where the climate provisions are? Do you think that there's any opportunity that you could do something that is just climate focused and maybe doesn't have all of the other elements?
Well, we absolutely have to do something, and I believe that we will do something going forward. Now, I also want to say that coming out of the Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee a year ago, we have actually passed the first standalone climate bill in the United States Senate to pass, and with the word climate in it. I mean, in the past, I had to refer to it as severe weather. We finally have people willing to admit that there's a climate crisis beating us up over the head. This is something to support our farmers and our ranchers. It's very important tools for USDA to work with them on aggressive conservation and regenerative agriculture and how we could help them create voluntary carbon markets if they chose to do that. Passed the Senate by 92 votes. We're now waiting for it to pass the House. The infrastructure bill as well had major provisions in it, as you know, now law, that charging stations for electric vehicles, which I also care a lot about. And we're making those in Michigan and going to be making a whole lot more. But other kinds of issues with resiliency around climate and so on. So we've done those things, so much more to do, so much more to do. And what I think is really doable this year is, first of all, to take that next piece. We have the electric vehicle charging stations. Now we need the clean energy manufacturing credits so that we are bringing our jobs home. We're making the batteries here. We're making the semiconductors here. We are doubling down on solar production, which we need to do. And by the way, 1/3 of all the polysilicon that's needed for solar panels in the world actually can be produced in Michigan at some place called Hemlock Semiconductor. And because of Chinese dumping and other kinds of things, they have been dramatically slowed. But we get a solar production tax credit. It will make all the difference in the world. So there's a series of things. We bring jobs home. We make things in America. We create jobs, and we create the clean energy manufacturing that we need to have. The other piece that I believe we can do is the nature-based solutions. Climate smart agriculture, sustainable forestry. I mean, what we are doing to support rural communities. Our largest forest is Tongass National Forest in Alaska, and it holds more carbon in the forest than we emit in a year in driving vehicles in the United States. So how we manage our forests, not just the Amazon, but the Congo, it's our own forest, makes a huge difference. And one of the ways to take carbon out of the atmosphere, because we've got two challenges: don't put any more in, or slow down the pollution, but then we have to take carbon out of the atmosphere. And one of the ways to do that is to plant a whole lot of trees, because they're nothing but carbon.
I want to talk about that, though. When you talk about trees, obviously that's an issue where that you could plant a lot of trees, and there's a lot of folks that are planning on that. But there's been a lot of people, I covered downtown and industries for a really long time. And sometimes it feels like companies are honestly taking this in going further than Congress is able to, moving faster, making more pledges. What do you see that future of that kind of public-private partnership? Do you look to companies to try and kind of help also find the solutions here, where sometimes government can be pretty slow, as we all know?
It's all hands on deck moment. Everybody's got to be all in. We need innovation. We need leadership in the private sector. We need the public sector partnering with the support, the incentives, the infrastructure. We've got to be all in. I mean, and frankly, one of the best ways to really do what needs to be done would be to have a price on carbon, which a lot of the private sector understands. So building in that price of pollution, which we've done in other areas in our country over the years. So yes, we have to be all in. And some of it involves very expensive things. Some of it involves things that can be done inexpensively. Some of it is about our farmers and no-till operations and cover crops that keep carbon in the soil. And by the way, the more carbon in the soil, the healthier the soil. So it's a win-win for farmers, and they know that. So there's a whole range of things, and methane that we need to deal with, not only methane emissions and leakage with fossil fuel producers, but methane on the farm with our animal producers, which is part of the pieces that I wrote with my committee for Build Back Better on agriculture and on sustainable forestry. So it's really all of it, and we've got to get as much done as we can. And along the way, we have to make sure that we're helping get more people into electric vehicles, and the consumer tax credits are incredibly important to do that. I tell folks, we do this right in another couple of years or so, you don't have to worry about the price of gas. You can drive right by the pump. You don't even have to look at the sign. Won't matter.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about it in All Hands on Deck, and we talked about the situation in Ukraine, but certainly the price of gas is being felt across this country. Does that make an increased urgency in your mind that you really see how quickly things can change when we are dependent on foreign oil and other issues?
Well, first of all, I mean, over the years, we've seen the volatility of gas prices. And by the way, they're set by the oil companies in an international marketplace, and they pretty much control the supply. And we in our country produce more oil and gas than any other country in the world now. And with Russia, we get 1-2% from them. And so when we say we won't take more of their oil and gas, it is important, but not as impactful as it is when other countries, like Germany, have stepped up, or others where it's a very large part of their supply. So, but what I'm concerned about there is that gas prices are through the roof, no question about it. But we also know that there is a history of the oil companies taking advantage of this and price gouging, even before inflation and COVID and Ukraine. I can tell you in Michigan that once you hit Memorial Day and everybody's going up north to the cottage, prices are going to go up. They're going to go up, up, up. Then they're going to come down after Labor Day when people aren't driving as much. And, during COVID, prices went down because people weren't driving so much. So, this is a situation where, frankly, oil and gas companies need to be stepping up to be responsible now, too. If we're being asked to pay higher prices, in part to support the Ukrainians, which Americans are willing to do, we should not see price gouging where Americans are taken advantage of. So if they want to help, use the 9,000 leases that the oil companies already have and they're not drilling on. We want to create more supply? Okay, drill on those 9,000 leases. Maybe step back just a little bit on the last year. There were top 24 companies had $174 billion in profits in just 9 months. Maybe you could just take that down just a little bit and help Americans as we are all moving through COVID, as well as trying to support Ukraine.
We're going to quickly run out of time, but I do want to shift in terms of just thinking about the midterms, right? In Washington, a lot of folks are already thinking about what that might look like. Can you give me one or two of these proposals? And you've mentioned a bunch of them that are, you're very supportive of, you feel like need to happen on the climate issue that you think could get done before the midterm, if any.
I think our clean energy manufacturing tax credits, the cornerstone tax credit, 48C, is one that I partner with Senator Manchin on, and it's really a basis of retooling plants for clean energy manufacturing. And we both feel very strongly about that, and I know he supports the other provisions as well. I think the agriculture and forestry pieces we have the opportunity to get. I hope we can get at least the basic electric vehicle consumer credit extended, and we're working hard on a few other things. But I do think we can get some of these basic things that bring jobs home, allow us to compete successfully with China, and allow us to move forward in addressing the climate crisis.
We've been reporting a bit on some frustration among your fellow Democrats about where the White House has been on some of the issues, kind of in their communication. What grade would you give them when it comes to their efforts on climate?
I am so glad that Joe Biden is president of the United States. I cannot tell you, on every front, from Ukraine, President Trump stood with Putin every single time, and probably would have us out of NATO and be standing back and letting Putin do whatever he wanted, frankly. And he's still talking about supporting Putin. So I'm glad President Biden is president of the United States. I'm glad he is where he is on climate. I personally believe that they administratively are moving forward very strongly. They're certainly working with me on the Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee. I'm very supportive of everything we're doing. It's a tough time. It's a tough climate in a lot of ways, including a 50-50 Senate. This is not easy, but I would give them top grades for all their hard work and the things they're doing.
And when you look towards the midterms, how big of an issue? Climate was clearly a big issue when it comes to the next generation. In this last election, do you think this is going to be one of those issues that, could potentially impact what happens for Democrats in the midterms?
I think that the climate crisis is something that will activate many, many people, certainly younger people, but people of all ages now who are watching the severe weather and the destruction in their communities, the loss of life that's happening, the forest fires that are happening. And so we need to be connecting that to what it really is in terms of the volatility, the atmosphere holding more carbon pollution and what that is doing to us right now. And so in Michigan, I would tell you that the Great Lakes are now warming faster than the oceans. The Great Lakes are warming faster than the oceans. Every single person in Michigan cares about that. So I think it will be a major issue.
All right. Senator, thank you so much. I know you need to get to vote, so I'm going to let you wrap with that, but we appreciate your time this afternoon. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Take care. Thanks so much.
All right. Now I'd like to welcome Barbara Humphries, U.S. CEO of Siemens, to the virtual stage for a fireside chat. Barbara, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Anna.
All right. Well, what a great conversation to tee up our fireside chat with Senator Stabenow. First, Ceres is our sponsor. It's a nonprofit organization focused on solving sustainability challenges. I'd just love to get from your perspective at Siemens. Can you talk about the lens at how you view climate issues from a business perspective?
Indeed. When it comes to climate, we recognize this has to be a decade of action. And we at Siemens are ready to get to work. We've got 40,000 people across the United States, 17,000 suppliers. And over these last several years, we've made it core to our overall business strategy to actually bring our know-how to the table for sustainability. And, think about these global megatrends. There is climate change. There's greater urbanization. We've got aging demographics of people all around the world. We've got a global supply chain, and everything is going digital. Turns out these inexorable forces are working hard, and some have even accelerated during the pandemic. And so to take a company like ours and turn our know-how in electrification and automation and digitalization towards solving these world's biggest problems, it's actually something that we feel we have a responsibility to be participating in. So we set our own goals. Actually, in 2015, where we were the first large industrial company to set a carbon neutral goal, to be carbon neutral by 2030. We said we'd be halfway there by 2020. And in fact, we exceeded that midpoint objective. Now we're in the hard part of the curve. And it's our goal to help lead and be part of the dialogue across industry.
Talk about that. I mean, I think one of the things that's been interesting is this shift that we have seen, I think, definitely across the U.S., where climate was, I think oftentimes a very partisan issue. And now it seems that particularly in the private sector that it has become, kind of mission critical in a way that it maybe wasn't perceived 10 years ago.
Yeah, there are actually, I'll call it a convergence of several factors. And, whether you're thinking purely about climate science, or whether you're thinking about geopolitics and the need for energy security, or whether you're thinking about where are the best opportunities to drive the future of our economy that is more digital, turns out they all lead to the same mathematics of we need to be building more sustainable electrical systems to support our progress. And in fact, the technologies to do just that are here now. And it's everywhere from bringing more renewable power onto grids to then managing those grids integrating power into the buildings and now the vehicles. All of that is in a tremendous state of transformation. And so it is these convergence of forces that actually, I think, give us the momentum in this moment.
We were talking before when we were off stage a little bit about the number of times you've been to the White House in recent months to talk about these issues. If you had the president's ear, which I know you have, but if right now you had the president's ear, what would be your message to him when it comes to climate?
Yeah, it's been such a privilege to be part of this conversation, to join, for instance, in January, a CEO roundtable where the president asked just this. I mean, he asked the question of what are the priorities from the perspective of business. And I was so pleased to hear how well aligned we are across so many sectors of the economy. We know that we need to make investments in climate action. We know that, for instance, the transformation of the electric vehicle infrastructure is key. And the senator is really clear about this and has very bold goals for Michigan. We can see this in the auto manufacturers. And so I was pleased to be, one voice talking about how we can elevate this message. In order to have electric vehicles across this country, we also need to have the charging infrastructure. It really indicates we need to have open standards for the way we'll interact with those charging stations. And so Siemens has been using our voice to support all of that. We've also been loud proponents of the transformation of rail travel and the introduction both of high-speed rail as well as new forms of propulsion for rail. And we've introduced a hybrid diesel-electric Amtrak locomotive. These are all exciting developments that are well on their way.
Someone who takes the Amtrak to New York a lot, that sounds good to me. I want to talk about the business community in general and Congress, right? I think there's been a lot of frustration about how slow Congress is moving on several of these issues, in particular when it comes to climate. I know that more than 1,000 businesses signed a letter calling for historic climate investments throughout this reconciliation package, which now it's probably on shaky terms, if even that. Can you put into perspective how vital it is that Congress acts?
Yeah, if you ask business people what matters, they will tell you that stability matters, right? Knowing that we have a national agenda and that we are making progress toward that agenda matters. Far more than the investment the federal government might make, there is ample cash within the private sector that can be deployed if only we know where those national priorities are. And we already saw this with the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. As soon as the federal government began to take action in the bill, the bipartisan bill that was passed, you could see the flow of funds in the private sector as private investors began to invest in things aligned with our national agenda. So I think that's where we are now. If we are looking for signals from the federal government, we're looking for our legislators to put their money where their priorities are, actually begin to take action here. And with that stability, with that certainty, we can go ahead and move with other projects.
It's interesting. I've been talking to a lot of folks down in Austin at South by Southwest, and they were saying very similar to what you were just saying, that kind of the need to have some forecasting and certainty is why there's so much cash on the sidelines. If you had to pick one or two priorities to tell Senator Stabenow or to Congress, since this larger Build Back Better bill is struggling right now, what's one or two things that you think could be a real difference maker?
Yeah, I really do think that the senator hit the nail on the head. If there are tax credits that can go into localizing the manufacturing of key elements of our power infrastructure, that would be fantastic. We do recognize additional investment in EV charging is going to be helpful. And in fact, I've had people ask me, why is it that the federal government needs to invest in these things? It's literally in order to get us more rapidly to the tipping point where some of these technologies become very affordable, and then the market dynamics take over. So if the federal government can be looking at areas where they can provide the seed investment that leads then to the attraction of private dollars and American innovation, then we know we'll see that ball really start to roll.
to close on one note, which is competitiveness. I mean, I think one of the questions that is out there is how would this climate legislation or action on climate here in Washington help when it comes to the U.S. standing in the world, and the U.S. standing itself?
Yeah. Well, let's start with energy security. We can all see how vitally important it is right now. And it's not just in energy, but we are seeing this in many fields. One of these mega trends that we're talking about when we talk about supply chain, we see that globalization, the idea of tapping global innovation, but actually being able to manufacture locally or regionally is going to be a key element for both our competitiveness as well as our future security. So I'd pay attention there to the ability to bring things home. A lot of people are asking me, will this be affordable? I believe that there are two things that work here. One is automation itself makes our own workforce more productive. We're going to be able to compete on the national stage. This idea of low-cost countries will become less and less of a factor. And then when you couple that with our view that really the carbon cost, the cost to the planet of the way we're currently managing supply chains isn't sustainable, then what we'll find is it's actually far more affordable and sustainable to do things more locally.
All right, Barbara. Well, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I really appreciate it and getting your perspective on all things climate from Siemens and Ceres. And thanks to Ceres for partnering with us to make this conversation possible. A big thank you to all of you who joined, who are watching us on the live stream. If you aren't yet signed up for Punchbowl News, you can visit our website at punchbowl.news. And a quick reminder, I will be back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for a live in-person event with Senator Hagerty, a Republican from Tennessee, focused on financial services at the Roost in D.C. You can also stream that conversation if you can't make it in person. Have a great day and stay safe.